Hi, Garden Dad here. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about what we plant and when we plant it. Okay, so let's get started. So, determining what to grow. One of the things to be aware of is what kind of climate you live in. Different plants require different climates. It may sound obvious, but something that grows in the tropical rainforest won't grow in upstate New York. You want to determine what your planting zone is or plant hardiness zone is. There are resources online to help you determine that. You could just Google what is the plant hardiness zone for, put in your country or put in your area of the world. In the United States Department of Agriculture has a plant hardiness zone map where you could put in your zip code and it'll tell you what your zone is. As a result, when you're looking at plants, the better plant companies and seed companies will tell you what zones those seeds and plants thrive in. As an example, I want to grow apricot trees. I live in upstate New York. We're probably a zone 4 or 4B, whatever that means. It's fairly cold. A lot of apricot trees might be zone 5 or 6, which is a warmer climate. They thrive better in a warmer climate. So I have to look for apricot trees that are good for zone 3 or zone 4, the colder climates. So you want to be aware of what zone you live in and what zones your plants will tolerate. There'll be web links in the description to the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone Map. The next thing to think about is whether or not you're going to use transplants, like if you're growing vegetables, are you going to go to the garden center and buy already grown tomato plants or cucumber plants or squash plants, transplants, or are you going to take seeds and direct sow them into the ground? Will you plant seeds directly in the ground? That's called the direct sow method. Or some of the more advanced gardeners may start their seeds indoors with grow lights, and they'll grow their own plants from seed during the winter, and they'll be large enough to grow in the spring when it's time to put them in the ground. So I'll go to the landscape center and I'll buy a couple of local tomato plants, I'll buy a couple of cucumbers, but I don't start stuff on my own in my basement under grow lights. I will direct seed in the ground carrots and beets because you won't find transplants for those. So I'll direct seed carrots, beets, my squash, my winter squash, I'll direct seed those. That is, I'll put seeds right in the ground when the dirt gets warm enough. So basically you got to think about whether or not you want to direct seed, you want to buy transplants, or you want to start in the wintertime and start growing indoors under grow lights. That's too hard for me. That's breaking my keep it simple rule. This session is talking all about vegetables, but the same kind of concepts apply to flowers. Later on in the spring, early summer, we'll be putting out some flowers in our flower beds and things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about what kind of flowers you could direct seed, what kind of plants, flower plants you could buy. We'll talk a little bit more about flowers in a future session. So for what I call my kitchen garden, I'll plant a couple of tomato plants, typically, some kind of slicing tomato. Jet Star is a typical tomato I'll buy, and then I'll buy a couple of cherry tomatoes. I usually get a couple of cucumber plants, market more as a typical cucumber variety that I get. Usually I get bell peppers. I don't know that I'm going to do bell peppers this year.
Editing Lauren here. A quick note about pepper plants. One of the tricky things about planting your own pepper plants, especially if you have a small garden, is that they can be cross-pollinated and take on the properties of the pepper plants around them. So basically, a bumblebee can hop from your bell pepper plant to your hot habanero pepper plant, and then you're going to get a cross between bell pepper and habanero pepper babies, which means your bell peppers might wind up a little zestier, spicier than you intended. So is this always going to happen? No. No, I've had good luck with just some bell pepper plants, but keep in mind that if you're planning to plant like a mild pepper, near a hot pepper, or if your next door neighbor tends to plant hot peppers, that you might get a nice zesty bell pepper, some kind of cross in between. It might not be as hot as a habanero, but there's a chance that it could be just a little bit zestier than you intended. So if in the past you found that your bell pepper plants were a little bit zestier, it's probably because a bumblebee was hopping from plant to plant and made your peppers just a little bit zestier.
It's easier for me to go down to the local farmer's market and buy a bushel of peppers and roast them myself. I might get a couple of green zucchinis for my kitchen garden vegetables. Also, I try to support the local nursery when I buy plants. I know they're growing them here. I know they're using varieties that will grow in our climate. I'm always concerned, being in upstate New York, that the big box stores are getting vegetable plants from big farms down south, and it's not clear to me those plants are going to be hardy enough up here. So I like to support the local farmers, the local farmers markets and garden stands. I like to get stuff that I know was grown locally. Because the primary goals of my gardening are to get exercise and to save a little money, I direct seed the storage vegetables. So I'll grow Waltham butternut squash, Zeppelin delicata squash. These Zeppelin delicatas are really nice. The skin is edible, and you can't get them in the store. You just can't get them in the store. I grow potatoes. I'm going to talk more about potatoes in separate sessions. And I grow garlic. I grow a hardneck garlic. Music and porcelain strains are what I grow. I'll talk more about garlic in a separate session. There's a lot I could talk about garlic. But those are what I grow. They're storage crops. Garlic and potatoes don't grow from traditional, what you would think would be little seeds. Potatoes, you grow little small potatoes to become a big potato plant that'll yield you a bunch of potatoes. And garlic, you grow an individual clove to make a garlic head. The other direct seed vegetables that we're expanding into this year are carrots. I'm going to grow this year Nance, Yellowstone, and Purple Haze carrots. I'm going to grow Detroit Dark Red beets, and I'm going to grow a Shinto Kiwa cucumber. It's one of these long cucumbers. We like them better. We grow regular market more cucumbers too, but we like these Shinto Kiwa cucumbers. So where do we get these seeds and these plants? Like I said, I like to get my plants from local nurseries, local garden centers. We buy seeds, look forward to our seed catalogs coming in every year. We look online. We use Fedco. It's a cooperative out of, I think, Maine or Massachusetts. They have great descriptions, and they've got heirloom seeds, and they've got untreated seeds, and they've got organic seeds. But there's also very well nationally known seed companies, Johnny's, Harris, Park, Burpee. They're all good seed companies. The other thing that you may want to consider for plants, if you have friends or neighbors that grow, some of them that do grow indoors during the winter, that grow from seed, they'll typically always have extra plants. I know when I used to grow my own tomato plants, I'd grow flat, like a 4 6-packs worth of plants or 6 6-packs worth of plants, and you end up with 50 or 60 tomato plants because you're just spreading the seeds around and you're not sure what your germination rate's going to be. You always had extra plants, extra tomatoes, extra cucumbers, whatever it is you were planting. So if there are people that you know that grow, they probably have extra plants that they can't even give away. So you might be able to pick up some plants from your friends and neighbors who grow their own plants. Like I said, with potatoes, you go to a local farm supply store. Sometimes nurseries will carry seed potatoes. You want certified seed potatoes, but I'm going to have a video coming up where I actually go out and buy my seed potatoes, and I'll show you that process, how I go about doing that. Garlic, you're going to go to a local farmer's market, and they're going to be selling heads of garlic. Essentially, you take a head of garlic, you break up the cloves, and each clove gets planted. Each clove will become its own head of garlic. But you're going to want to buy those locally. And it depends on your climate. If you're in California, you could get a soft neck garlic. Where I am in the Northeast, some people might grow soft neck garlic. I grow hard neck garlic. It winters over. You plant it in October and you harvest it in July. And I'll do a whole separate session on garlic. If you want to try some fruit, I could recommend a really easy fruit. Raspberries. Now, people have been turned off by raspberries because they have thorns. I grow Latham raspberries. They're not thorn-free, but they don't have very many thorns at all. And what thorns they do have, they're not meaningful. We just have wonderful raspberry yields every year. Put them in a place where you could keep them managed because they do spread. You don't want them in the middle of your flower bed. You want them somewhere where you could mow around them, or they're going to be up against the wall of your garage or another building. They're nice. And if you think about some fruit, they come back every year. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. Pick up some raspberry plants. When should you plant? There's going to be resources online for where you live. In the United States, there's a resource called the Farmer's Almanac, and they have a Farmer's Almanac planting calendar. And you can look up where you live, and it'll tell you what months you could plant carrots, what months you could plant cabbage, what months you put your squash in the ground, what months you might put your corn in the ground. It's a really nice resource, and we're going to post that link in the description. If you don't live in the United States, I'm sure you can Google the planting calendar for your geography. Also, the Farmer's Almanac has last frost dates for your area, which is important if you're going to be putting plants out into the ground, direct plants. If you're not direct seeding, you're going to be planting transplants. You don't want to put them out when you could still have a frost and they can get killed off. So you want to be aware of your frost dates. And then you got to look at the seed packets that you're buying. They'll give you planting and transplanting guidance. It'll say days to maturity, what the seed spacing should be. So there's a lot of good information on the seed packets as well as with the seed companies when you look up the descriptions of the plants. But your planting calendar might differ than mine, but I'm going to talk about mine, but you're going to probably want to look up based upon your locale what your planting calendar should really be. Now I'm going to talk through my personal annual planting and task calendar. And we'll have this posted in the description. It's probably going to be a PDF. What I do month to month in terms of gardening. So January, February, March, I select and I buy the seeds that I'm going to order. I do pruning. I prune my raspberries. I prune my apple trees. I prune my plum trees. I do that kind of outside cleanup gardening. March and April, I take the snow thrower off my garden tractor. I change the oil on my garden tractor. And I change the mower blades on my garden tractor. Kind of basic maintenance stuff. I've got a John Deere garden tractor. I've got, a couple acres I have to mow. I bought it used 15 years ago for $4,000. At one point, I thought it was going to die. I had a problem and ended up getting it fixed. I priced out one that had about the same horsepower. It had a big mower deck, a power bagger chute so I could pick up my leaves in the fall, and a snow thrower. And it's going to cost me $12,000 or $15,000. And that was before, all this inflation and tariffs and stuff. So it was like buying a used car. I change the oil every year. So if you've got a lawnmower, garden tractor, change the oil. This thing's a 2001 garden tractor, and it's basically 25 years old. Change the oil on your machines and change the blades, and you'll be happy. It's like an investment. In April and May, I buy my potato seeds. I buy straw. I use a lot of straw for mulching. I mulch my garden to keep the weeds down. I use straw to mulch the potatoes, to help the potatoes because they can't be exposed to light. And I buy fertilizer. Also in April and May, if I have any plants, shrubs, I'll try to get those transplanted in April and May. Garden Girl made a request for some lilacs. I've got a couple of very mature lilac plants on my property. I'm going to dig up some babies, and I'll dig them up, and I'll bring them over to her place, and we'll get them planted. So we'll transplant shrubs. I plant my cold weather vegetable seeds. That would be the beets and the carrots. If you're into cabbage and lettuce, you can get those in the ground as well. And then don't forget to log all your planting dates and your expected harvest dates based upon the seed package. I tell you, you think you're going to remember when you plant stuff, and you don't. Just log the dates that you plant it and log the dates or the number of days that you expect to harvest. May and June, I plant my potatoes. And I plant my annual flower boxes, marigolds, or my wife picks out the flowers, I dig the holes. In June, I plant my warm weather vegetables, and it might be a little later than some people plant. Some people like getting them out on Memorial Day in the U.S., late May. I plant mine a little bit later. I'm harvesting later. During the dead of the summer, everybody's got garden stands with kitchen vegetables, tomatoes and cucumbers and all that kind of stuff. And when those die down, I'm finally harvesting mine. So I usually get late harvests. I also plant my winter squash, my Waltham butternut and my Zeppelin delicata squash. I have some irrigation soaker hoses that I get those set up. So I make sure all my all the stuff that I'm growing is going to get irrigated. In June, also, the garlics send up seeds called garlic scapes, and I snip those off. And I'll tell you more about that in my next garlic video. July is garlic month. Second week of July, I harvest my garlic, sometimes a little earlier. I have to set up my garlic drying racks, which are basically wooden frames with chicken wire. Get the garlic dried in the drying racks. I just let it air dry. And then I sort it by size because I pick the largest heads to become my seed for next year. August through September, I'm harvesting my summer vegetables and my fruit, right? My raspberries and things like that. September and October, I prepare my cold storage area. Essentially, I have a walk-in basement, and I built some storage racks, some shelving, essentially, that I have shelves where I could store my potatoes and my squash. That's where I keep my potatoes and my squash all winter long. It's April, and I still have potatoes from last year, which is great. October and November, I'm freezing squash. I don't freeze all my squash. I don't freeze the Waltham butternut, but I will clean and freeze my delicata squash. We have a couple of apple trees. We don't spray them. We don't oil them. We don't do anything like that. What we get, we get. Survival of the fittest. The apples are pretty good. They have some, might have some marks on them, but that's okay. We peel them and we bake them and we make like an applesauce, but all it is baked apples. And I freeze it and we have baked apples all winter long. It's kind of nice. I put it into my oatmeal or whatever. Sometimes I just eat it plain. Those months is when I harvest more fruit and try to get it frozen. If I had some plums, I might boil down the plums and make a plum sauce, that kind of thing. Come December, not a lot of gardening to do, but I do some cooking. So maybe I'll do some bonus videos of me cooking. I make gluten-free, dairy-free stuff. So if any of you guys are gluten-free or dairy-free, put a comment in there, and I'll be sure to show you how I go about making gluten-free, dairy-free biscottis and cherry cookies and things like that. I also do some cooking. I make sausage bread. I make my own sausage. So maybe December will be some cooking videos from Garden Dad. I don't know. It depends on whether or not you guys want to see them or not. Okay, that's it for now. Pick out your seeds. Think about what you want to grow. Think about what you can grow based upon where you live. You have a great day. Be kind to everybody. Smile at everybody. And have a great day every day.